I went over all the information about the anatomy in part 1. Here I'll be giving examples of how to apply said information. Also, this video will mainly be about female legs. I wasn't really planning it to be, but it ended up that way. Recipes. My recipe for simple poses is a combination of ovals and lines. I use ovals for the upper leg since it's usually the part that would have a lot of mass, and I use lines for the lower leg since they would have the most movement for this type of poses. I don't always follow this exactly though. For angles that I'm not comfortable with, or maybe if the legs are muscular, I would just loosely sketch the whole thing even. For poses and angles where foreshortening is involved, I use cylinders for the upper and lower leg and a sphere for the knees. Now let's get to the examples. A simple pose. We have the hips, the upper legs, the knees, and the lower legs. The upper leg starts big and gets smaller as it reaches the knees. The lower leg has this curvy flow to it, both the same for the inner and the outer side, since the calf muscles aren't very developed. There isn't much going on the surface, since these aren't very muscular. The planes of the knees are portrayed with shadows. Similar to the previous example, there's a bit more perspective involved this time. The hips, upper leg, knees, and the lower leg. The same for the upper leg and the lower leg, and again, not much going on with the surface. Also, there's perspective used when placing the legs here. This is something I've mentioned in another video. Check it out if you haven't seen it already. This time a bit more fit example. So the muscles are a bit more prominent. They still don't affect the silhouette that much, but they are visible on the surface. On the upper leg there's the quads and the sartorius, starting from the hips and then going behind the knees. They're not that developed, so they're just portrayed with shadows than lines. I portrayed them with lines though, since I don't want to get into shading in this video. This time a really muscular example. The hips, upper leg, knees, and the lower leg. On the upper leg there's the quads. They're really developed, so they even affect the silhouette a bit as well. There's the middle part and the other two parts. Notice how the inner part sits lower than the outer part. For this example, the muscles are portrayed both with lines and shadows. Also notice how the artist drew the sartorius really pronounced. I personally don't do this, but it is a thing that you can do. There's also the calves, the inner and the outer one. An example for a back view. Glutes, upper leg, and lower leg. On the surface there isn't many muscles visible, but we can see how the upper and the lower leg connect visually through the hamstrings. Another back view. Glutes, upper leg, and the lower leg. There's a bit of the knees visible as well. On the surface, there's this outer side muscle that's kinda visible due to the angle. There's also the hamstrings and the connection part of the calves. This is kind of a difficult angle, especially the hip part of it. A sitting pose. Hips are kinda important for these kind of poses. Since the upper legs are front facing, there's a bit of foreshortening involved. Also notice how they're squished. Then we have the knees and the lower leg. For the upper leg and the knees, I've used cylinders and spheres. Just one with lines for the lower leg, since there wasn't any foreshortening on that part. Another sitting pose. Hips, upper leg, knees, and the lower leg. One thing that could help you draw cross-legged poses like this is to focus on the placement of the knees. A crouching pose. Even though mostly blocked, the hips are still there. We can see a bit of the glutes as well due to the body type and angle. Notice how the upper leg gets this S-curve when bent like this. It's not that prominent since this pose is front facing, but it's still there. Other than that, there's the calves and a bit of the upper leg squishing. There's a tiny bit of perspective involved with the placement of the feet here. One last example for a muscular leg. I would really recommend you check other works from the artists shown here as well. I will be putting up links to their socials in the description. A couple more examples without commentary. That's gonna be it for this video. I hope this was helpful. Thank you for watching till then. Have a nice day.